I'm your host, Dawn Taylor, and today we are talking to the amazing, sorry, I actually like freaking love this girl, Kiara Brown. So today's topic, if you read the title, is My Family Has Lived Here Longer Than Yours Has. So yeah, we're doing it. We're digging into race. Before we get started, I want to just tell you a little bit about our guests so you can be as excited as I am. Kiara is a lover of kids, a lover of people. She's a 23-year-old Black Canadian woman born and raised here in Edmonton, in Canada, not in another country. She's experienced racism like most people of color, and she really wants to just share some insight on what it's like and how it's affected her in life, but also to give us some advice on, like, as a privileged white female, what is appropriate and not appropriate to say. We're going to dive into all of the good stuff. So I can't wait to get started. Welcome to the show, Kiara.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. I know when I was talking to my staff about this episode, they're like, oh, so you're going for all of the hard topics that are gonna get you canceled. And I started laughing and I said, no, that's why we're having this conversation. Is cancel culture is such a huge thing right now. And like, I remember that when you and I had a conversation one day and I was asking questions because I said, as someone who's like super curious, like I literally have this massive sign on my office wall that says like, no judgment, just curiosity. And I live from this place of curiosity. So I often want to hear about someone's culture, or where they're from, or how they live life. Like I'm known for asking people like, what were the 10 meals you ate all the time growing up? Like, this is just who I am. But I was like, how do I ask these questions appropriately to not offend someone? And you made this statement at that point. You're like, what's hardest is a lot of people are like, oh, where are you from? And you're like, really? Like my family's lived here longer than yours has. Like, like generationally, born and raised over and over and over in this country. And yet you still don't get treated that way. And that's when you and I decided to like chat about this and dive into this. So let's start with like, you used to live over the back fence from me.
Yeah, I was like 7 or 8, I
Oh,
think.
tiny.
Really little. I don't know how many years ago that was,
A
but
couple.
yeah, quite a few, more than 5. I remember it so vividly. I remember like we were playing in the backyard and like I seen somebody staring at us through the window and I was like, who is that? And it was a little girl, which was your niece.
I was like, that
And
made it sound like I was staring at you out a window.
no.
No, just it
And
was my
then she's
niece.
like, hey, let's go play. And I was like, oh, like, sure, like, let's meet up. And then we started talking about what my parents did for work. And then she started talking about what you do for work. And I was like, oh, it's kind of similar. Let's introduce our parents. And then we kind of just like were in each other's lives from that point on.
Totally.
And we
And
used to bake and like make food.
right.
It was super fun. Yeah,
It's
that
been
was
a
our,
couple years,
it has.
right? So even as that little girl, right? I remember like you and all your sisters coming over, and you were these 5 beautiful little Jamaican like dolls. Like you were just the sweetest kids ever. And I loved having you over to hang out with our nieces and nephews. And it was so much fun. But when did this whole concept and idea of race and color and being like looking different or being different or whatever it is, like when did that really show up in your life and how?
Um, like from elementary school, I feel like for me specifically, like luckily I didn't experience like hard racism like some people do, like, getting like bullied and like the extreme stuff.
Totally.
But I like my sisters and I were definitely raised to not really like be judgmental towards people who look different than us. And like our
Yeah.
family is full of like different colors anyways. So like we were used to seeing that like within our family, but then when it came to like being in public, like I would get, annoying comments from people like from kids, like the typical child comment that's like, oh, like your skin looks like shit. And I'm like, okay, like thank
Who
you.
even says that?
I don't know.
Oh my word.
It's like funny for kids to talk about the
Yeah.
bathroom. And so, like I've gotten those comments like as a young child, or, like people would like make fun of, how big my lips were and like,
Yeah.
you know, and like there was like a whole stigma, like, you know, once I got into like the dating age, like stigma, how like, you know, guys don't like to go for black girls. So like, you know, like I always felt kind of on the outside. Like there wasn't a lot of black people at the schools that I went to. It was really mostly just my sisters and I. So
Yeah.
we were like known because we were like one of two black families that were in that entire school. So it was kind of hard to forget who we were. But then, you know, there was always like the comments and the whispering and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it was like kind of hard to like fit in and like accept myself. Like, you know, there were times where I'm like, you know, I kind of wish that I wasn't black because then maybe I would be more accepted by other
Yeah.
people, or, you know, maybe I would be liked more, or, you know, like comments about my hair. Like, I'm just like, can I just be normal, you know, for everybody else, like socially acceptable? So yeah, I would say from like a young age, that's where it started and just kind of progressed as I got
Yeah.
older. And I didn't really know a lot about, you know, racism and stuff like that. Like it wasn't really talked about by my parents. Like you just kind of hope that you didn't have to experience it, but it wasn't like
Yeah.
a subject that they would be like, oh, you know, somebody says blah 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 to you, like, you know, let me know. Like it was just not talked about by my parents. It wasn't brought up that much. Like maybe it was hinted at, but I feel like we were so little that we didn't really understand what they were talking about. No
Yeah.
shade towards my parents at all. I'm sure they,
Oh,
you
no, 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 for sure.
know, would have tried to shed light on the subject, but you know, we were always around family, so we didn't have to worry when we were
Yeah.
at home about experiencing that.
Well, and it's interesting because we live in the same city. For anyone listening who's outside of Edmonton, we live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And Edmonton is known for being so multicultural.
Yeah.
Like there is a group or like every single country I swear in the world is represented in Edmonton in a big way.
Right?
Like it is the most cultural city I've ever been to in my entire life, which is so, so, so cool. But I remember talking to your mom one time and saying, like I remember the day I saw my first black person. Like as crazy as that is, and was this stupid little kid who probably made inappropriate comments, but like getting on a bus when I was 8 or 9, and I was like, whoa, right? Coming from like this little northern town, and it so wasn't talked about. Like it wasn't discussed, it wasn't talked about, and I feel dumb even saying that, right? But like there just wasn't an emotional intelligence around it, the same as around like LGBTQ, like around all these things. Like there just wasn't. And
Yeah.
part of that is just generational, and that is not a justification or an excuse for any of it. But there's a reason. There's a reason why so many of like different generations and people raised in certain areas actually just don't know. And so no, I know I have friends of every nationality, and I have friends all over the world, and they always laugh because they're like, you're so hilarious. The questions you ask are so funny, but you're like, you know it's innocent, but you're just so curious. And I'm like, but teach me how to talk. Like I want to know. I want to know how to have an amazing conversation and know about your beliefs and your culture and your life and all of these things without offending, without hurting, without feeling judged for what I'm saying. So can you give some insight into that in your world? Like okay, so let's start with like how long has your family been in Canada, and where culturally genetic wise where are you from? Or whatever the
So,
proper way is to word that.
so me and my sisters and I and my dad, we were all born here in Alberta.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know where exactly my dad was born. I'm pretty sure he was born in Edmonton as well, but
Yeah.
I could be wrong. My mom is from Jamaica, and it's funny because like when people would ask me like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from here.
You're
They
from
would like, they
Canada.
wouldn't believe me. That's why I hate that question so much, because they won't believe me. They're like, no, where are you really from? I'm like, really, what do you mean
Yeah.
here? Like, like one time I told somebody, like I was like, I was born in the Grey Nuns Hospital at this time on this day. Like I can find out the room for you if you really want to know. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? Like where? And so once I would say like, my mom's from Jamaica, they're like, oh, so you're Jamaican, and I'm like, no, I've never even been there. So
Yeah.
like there's some people like they're like, oh, like you are Jamaican because your mom is, and I'm like, well, technically no. I don't know anything about Jamaica. I don't even know what the capital of Jamaica is.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm like, just because she's from there doesn't mean that that's what I am. But it's like the I understand the question. Like I get it, you know, like if I see an Asian person, I don't assume that they're from here, but I don't ask because I'm like, I know what it's like to
Because
get
you
that
know.
question.
Yeah.
Like I just kind of wait for it to come up in conversation. I don't mind people asking me questions. It's just when they don't believe me that it like starts to annoy me.
So
And
what is a more, so you made an interesting statement on, or made a comment on, like, that's not who I am,
yeah.
right? Or where I'm from. Is there a better way to ask that question around, like, what is your background? What is your culture? What's your heritage? You know, like the ancestry style, like,
Yeah.
I'm
Um
German. I'm German, but I haven't ever been to Germany and I don't know German.
yeah.
But like that's where all my grandparents were born,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? So like I can say that that's my, I don't know, what is the proper wording for that?
I
Like if
feel
somebody was to ask you, because like for
proud.
me personally, like this is like knowing your family, right? There's
Yeah.
things that you guys do, there's cultural things right down to how you guys are nicknamed,
Mhm.
all of these things because of your mom from Jamaica, right? Like there's just some like even your mom's 40th birthday party. I remember her 40th birthday party and it was this whole thing and I was like, wow. And she's like, "Oh, it's a Jamaican thing." Right down to the food, the music, like all these things, the dress code, like everything. So like
Yeah.
there are things about your life, right? That I've always been so curious about that I'm like, "Oh, that's so
Yeah.
interesting." But like what is the appropriate way to ask without sounding like an idiot?
Um,
Do you know what I mean?
I get it. Yeah. It's like it's such a gray area because it's like depending on what you've been through, it could be not offensive, but it could be offensive. I feel like
Totally.
the best way to ask, like, it's like it depends on the person. Like some people are very easily offended. I feel like if
That's
you
just life these days, it seems.
right, like if you're genuinely very curious, like I feel like you could start with that, but don't like make that the beginning of the conversation. Like if you're trying to get to know the person, I feel like ask certain questions first, you know, like about their work
Yeah.
life or whatever, and then kind of ease your way into the conversation. But then like be like, you know, like I'm just curious, like, were you born here or, you know, were you born somewhere else?
Yeah.
And then, you know, whatever they answer, like if they say they're from here, like the follow up is always where your parents from for me.
Yeah.
Um, which I don't mind saying where they're from. I feel like the best way to word it is like, are your parents born here too, or like were they from here? But like, make it sound like interesting, or like that you're into the conversation, what
Yeah.
they're actually talking about, not just like, oh, like, you know, I was just being nosy kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's so hard to like know, and like for me, I don't really know much about Jamaican culture. We weren't really brought up in a Jamaican way.
No.
So a lot of
No,
questions
you weren't.
about Jamaica, like I'm like, I have no idea. Like we didn't really eat traditional Jamaican foods. We weren't taught, you know, we weren't it wasn't talked about, you know, how my mom grew up in Jamaica, like anything like that. So I'm like, I have no idea. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, do I even have a culture at this point? Like I have a background, but like I'm just a Canadian gal with darker skin. Like I'm like, I have
Hey,
no
that
idea.
is so amazing though. Like, do I even have a culture at this point? Like that almost brings up like its own topic of like, what is our culture?
Yeah.
Like, what
Like,
does that even mean?
like I always make a joke that Canada doesn't really have a culture because it's
It's just a
just a
mix.
country. I'm like, like you hear about like Italian culture and like, oh, like, in Italy, this is what we do. I'm like, we don't do that here. At least I don't do that here. I've never met any Canadian that's like, oh yeah, like that's so Canadian. Like, that's
Other than like
in
poutine.
Canada. That's yeah, like literally poutine, like wearing
Poutine and
shorts in
Canada
minus
Goose.
10 degrees. I'm like, that's Canadian. Anything else that's like
It's true.
specific foods, like dances, clothes. I'm like, there's nothing here that really like
No.
makes us fancy or interesting. Like we just have the stereotypes that everybody likes to make fun of. But
Oh,
I
that's
don't
so
even
interesting.
I'm like, I don't even know anything about my culture really at
Yeah.
all. So I'm like, when people ask those questions, like part of me is annoyed, but part of me is also like a little bit embarrassed because I'm like, I don't know. Most people I feel like they know a little bit at least, but I'm like, I have no idea. Like
Yeah.
I can't answer your questions, guys. I'm sorry.
No, that is no, and it makes sense. Like oh man, for anyone who hasn't been to Canada, man, come to Edmonton and just come to Heritage Days and
Literally.
experience Canada in a different way. So looking up culture versus heritage, right? Culture is made up of our beliefs and habits as a group or society,
Mhm.
right? That's our culture. So like Edmonton has a culture. A group will have a culture,
Yeah.
right? Where the heritage is things included from the past,
Yeah.
right? That are then coming into the present and are constantly changing. So I know one thing I'll often ask in my work is because a lot of generational stuff is so like it's so intertwined, right? Like we hold the trauma of our ancestors and our DNA for up to 3 generations,
Yeah.
right? So it's an interesting topic today because like I have to ask this every single day in my work is like what is your background,
Yeah.
right? And I'm constantly like, and one of the ways that I have often started asking it is like, where are your ancestors from?
Oh, that's a good way to ask.
Right? Like not you, not where are you from? Like where are your
Yeah.
ancestors from?
That's
Because
such a
like
good.
my ancestors are from like Germany and the Ukraine and Russia and the States and like all of those areas that doesn't make me that way,
Yeah.
right? But growing up we were raised with some cultural habits and beliefs and things based on that,
Yeah.
right? Like there are some weird things of my childhood that I'm like, oh my word, I'm so Eastern European. Like my relatives definitely are Eastern Europeans,
Yeah.
based on that action or that belief or whatever it is. And so would you appreciate that as the question more? Is like where are your ancestors
Yeah.
from?
Yeah. I feel like that's like because it's not assuming that I'm from somewhere else or that I am something else. And it kind
Totally.
of like makes it, at least for me, like I'd be like, oh, like this person actually really is interested
Yeah.
like my history. Like they're not just fishing for information to like
Yeah.
make jokes or something. Like, yeah, I like the way that it's worded. I feel like that's much more respectful and it'll avoid less controversy if people just ask that question instead of not believing the person that they're talking to.
Just a little easier. Well,
Yeah.
and tell me if I'm wrong, because I've been thinking through this, right? Like even just within my own clients, like someone actually asked me one time, they're like, so what kind of people do you work with? And I was like, humans? Like I was like, I'm
What
not
do you mean?
fully understanding the question. But it was someone who wanted to refer someone from another culture to me, like from a different
Okay.
ethnic background, however we want to word that, ancestral background, right? And I was like, no, no, no. I love working with people from other cultures and backgrounds because I really understand a lot of, and I, I, I'm very, very curious about like how our great grandparents were raised and their beliefs on things and how that's traveled down generationally, even though like I can say I'm German and not know a thing about German culture. I
Yeah.
could Google characteristics of an Eastern European woman, and I probably check off 90% of the boxes.
Yeah.
Right. And I find that so interesting and so empowering to understand where people come from, because it plays so
Exactly.
much into like who they are currently. But so two of the things I was thinking is like to ask someone like, where are your ancestors from? And did your family carry any of those traditions into your childhood?
That's another really good question. Yeah.
Right? Like did any of those cultures, did any of those things get carried into your childhood?
Yeah, I like that question. And at least then like, you can kind of get to know what where they stand without offending them.
Well, because then if it's like, yeah, not a thing,
Yeah, then
right? Then you're like, okay,
kind of
cool.
have all the information that you need.
Done. Conversation over.
Right? Next topic.
Yeah, but if it's like, actually, yeah, we had like a crazy childhood with all of these traditional things and all of these things that were from my childhood, I can be like, oh, that's amazing,
Yeah.
right? Tell me more.
And
Like,
then I
I'm
feel like from there,
curious.
then you can be like, so like, were you born here but just raised that way?
Yeah,
Then it's not as offensive. You're already in the conversation. So it's like, okay, like now I can kind of ask like where you're from. And then there's no like big rant or tangent, you
yeah,
know, to whoever about like people are so disrespectful or whatever.
right. And I honestly think that the majority of people don't mean to be disrespectful,
Yeah.
right? Like they
Actually,
really
I had one
don't.
guy that was, I don't know if those were his intentions, but he was pretty rude. Like I had just
Oh,
encountered. But you know what? I find like especially here, no offense, but like it's a lot of African people. If you're not from Africa, but you are black, it's like insane to them that you could be
oh,
born here.
interesting.
Every like semi rude encounter that I've had with somebody like just being super weird, it's always with somebody from Africa. And I have no idea why. Like my mom's like, yeah, like Africans are just like that. But I'm like, I don't
I
understand.
love the I love the like weird, almost like racism within racism.
Yeah, like I'm like,
Do
is
you
it
know what I mean?
just so bad? Like I don't get it. But like there's still like I have a coworker and like she's from Africa and
Yeah.
she was new to the daycare and she had asked me, she was like, are you from Africa? And I was like, no. She's like, where are you from? And I was like, I was born here. And she was like, that's interesting. And left. And I was like, what do you mean that? Why did you laugh like that? Like, why is that interesting? Like, or like when I was in school, this other African girl was like, where are your parents from? And I was like, my mom's from Jamaica. And he's like, what? She was like, what about your dad? And I was like, oh, he's from Canada. And she's like, your dad's white. I was like, what? I never said that. Like, I don't
Fun.
even look half white. Like, I mean, maybe I
No.
do, but I'm like, no.
Check the show notes. You can see a gorgeous picture of her, by the
Literally, like,
way.
look at all this. This where in this is maybe my hands. That's about it. Like,
No, there's
I'm like, what? And then like those were just two like weird encounters, but like I'd say like the
yeah,
rudest one. I was in an Uber, and again, it was this African guy. I only know because he had a really strong accent. So I was like, obviously, you're not
yeah,
from here. But he would was again asking where I was from. Like I was like, oh, like I'm from here. And he's like, oh, like what about your parents? And I told him like where they were from, and he's
yeah,
like, so like he's like, but where's your country of origin? And I was like, here. He's like, no, but
yeah.
like where were you born? And I was like, here, literally in this city. And he's
Yeah.
like, no, 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 like you're not really Canadian. And I was like, yes, I am. He would not let it go. Like he just kept saying that I'm not really Canadian and that like I don't know what I'm
Oh,
talking about. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I mean, I don't remember my birth, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't lie on a birth certificate. Like,
right?
this is really where I'm from. Like, and he kept laughing in my face. Like I was, in the back seat,
Yeah.
but he kept giggling and like just like, no, no, no. Like she doesn't know where she's from. Like, what is she talking about? Like talking to nobody, but like talking about me while I was still in the car. And I was
Oh
like,
my word.
is this a real conversation right now? Like, am I really talking? Like, is this really happening? And like I
Yeah.
reported him after that, like, because like I was offended. Like, and usually I don't get offended by like, racist things. Like, I'm just like, whatever. People are stupid. Like, they
They're
just
just
they just
ignorant.
lacked
Yeah.
common sense when they were born. But like, I was really offended. Like, I was like, how dare you say that I'm not really Canadian just because it's so shocking to you that I
Yeah.
could be born here. Like, yeah, that was like really the only conversation that I was like,
Isn't
I
that
don't like.
wild? So how do you, I mean, short of just getting mad, right? How do you deal with those comments when they come, or even like when, so what was the movie that just came out? Little Mermaid. And
Oh,
they,
oh my God.
okay, I want to know your thoughts on that. But also, like, how do you deal with those comments when those comments happen, or when you get treated different?
I usually just like rant to my sisters about it because
Yeah,
most of the time they're, you know,
they get
they
it.
agree. So, and like, I don't really have any black friends, honestly. Like, I have
Really?
sisters, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't remember really ever having any like black friends because there was not a lot of black people when I was in school. It was like other cultures, but yeah, I just
Yeah.
rant, to my sisters on the occasion, my mom, um, because I'm sure she's experienced more than I have. But yeah, I just rant about it and kind of get it off my chest. And then what mostly helps me is just making fun of how stupid that person was, because it's like I'm like, yeah, you can say all the racist shit you want, but I'm like, at the end of the day, you look dumber than I do. Like, you're
Yeah.
saying this out loud. Like, isn't that embarrassing to you? Like, I just mock them, and sometimes I'll like have a fake conversation of me telling them off, and it like
Oh, that's amazing.
I just get rid of all the annoyingness, and then I'm like, okay, I
You're
feel
like,
better.
I'm good now.
Yeah, because like, and I
Yeah.
think because it's mostly just comments, I'm like, whatever. Like, words are words. Like, you
Yeah.
know, like they hurt, but I can get over it. It's not like
Yeah.
you punched me in the face or anything. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, whatever. Okay, sure. Be ignorant. Like, that's you.
Yes. Like, I'm trying to think of like how many times in my life I've probably been so ignorant without even realizing it.
Yeah. And
Right?
like,
With like out even thinking.
and I like if it's I can tell that, they're just trying to be curious. I'm like, okay, like how cute, like still a
Yeah.
little bit in a mockery way, like if I'm venting, if it was like enough for me to talk about it after. But if it's like someone's genuinely curious, like I kind of appreciate that person. Like, oh, like you're so sweet. Like you're trying to kind of get to know who
Yeah.
I am. Like, and I like it. Like I respect it. And like, if it is something that's like bothered me and it's like then I know who you are, then I'm like, you know what? Like the other day when you said that thing, like a little bit racist. Maybe you shouldn't say that again. Like,
Right?
luckily it's just me and I'm a nonviolent person, but I'm like, there are some black people in this world that, they might do something, and you don't want to end up like that. So just watch what you're saying.
You're like, just don't say that again.
Right. Think
Well,
about it. Google it. Google is your best friend. She tells you
mm-hmm.
all the things you need to know. And like just and I feel like if you have to question it, like if you have to question like was that racist? Like if you're not a person of color, then it probably is. Like if you have to ask
Mm-hmm.
yourself, was what I said offensive? I'm like, yeah, probably. Just don't do it again. Apologize if you need to. Learn from your mistakes.
I know. How many times have I asked you, like, is this appropriate to say? Can I say it like this? And you just laugh at me. You're like, yeah, you're fine.
Yeah,
But I'm
depending on
also
who it
like,
is.
but I'm also I'm very, very hyper aware
Yeah.
of that because I don't ever want to come across as racist or stereotyping or anything at all, but I'm also
Yeah.
like the most curious human being and genuinely desire to know people and know
Yeah.
what their childhoods are like and know the weird foods they ate or weird
Yeah.
traditions they had, right? And we
Exactly.
do, like, we live in a country with over 200 distinct cultures,
Yeah. Which is insane.
right? Which is nuts if you think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reaction to Little Mermaid, talk to me about that
Ugh,
because the look on your face was amazing.
I hate that the whole controversy around the Little Mermaid. I'm like, what is wrong with people? I don't like. I have
Okay,
no issue.
explain.
Like,
Explain the controversy from your standpoint to begin with.
okay, so like, whatever time it was announced that the Little Mermaid was coming out, like people were like, oh yeah, it's so awesome.
Not the new one.
And then once the actress was announced, I don't even know her name, Haley something, and people saw that she was black, I was like, oh, I know this is gonna get all the white people mad, or like 60% of them at least, the bad ones. Um, and like I was kind of prepared for it. Like I didn't really comment to people about I didn't really encounter anybody in my personal life that was
Yeah.
offended by it. Thank God, because there would be some issues. But
Yeah.
but I mean, I like to read the comments just to see how dumb people are. Makes myself feel a little bit smarter that there's
Yeah.
some weird people, but um I was like, I mean, even though I was expecting the reaction, like I was kind of disappointed because it was like it was so heartbreaking. Like, there's so many little girls like videos that people would show of their like little black daughter, like so excited that, they look Ariel looks like her. And
Yeah.
then there was like a brief moment where people started to do blackface, like mocking those videos. I'm like, oh my God, like what is happening right now? Like
Yeah.
that was the part that like really disgusted me. Like I'm like, are you like, come on. It's like we're in the 21st century and you're acting that way and like posting it online for people to
Yeah.
see. I was in shock when people started doing blackface. Like I was like, okay, I think it's a little bit too much now. Like you can be mad about it, but don't do that. Like, you know,
So, do you think part of it is, and this is an interesting because I spend all day every day with people of every sexual
all the time.
preference, every identity, every like you name it, you name it. I talk to anyone and everyone on a daily basis. And it was interesting the people that just don't get it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean that in a way of like a man will never understood a woman's feelings around being always paid less. They'll never
Yeah.
get that. They'll never get the gender equality thing because they can't. They're on the other side of it.
On the wrong side of things.
Right? And I feel like often it's so funny. I'm like, I have to be so careful with what I say. Because I'm like,
Gotta be careful around me. People can stay offended if they want to.
no, right? But like, and I know I won't offend you, but like, I often think, is it that there's so many, so like say my grandparents, for example, my grandparents that were like these beautiful little German Mennonite farmers lived in this really tiny town and community of like maybe a couple thousand people at its peak, right? Like they weren't ever put in a position to know anything about other cultures,
Yeah.
right? Like that was never something they were faced with. It wasn't something that was even brought into their world. Like if you were raised in northern Saskatchewan in a little tiny farming community and every street name within 10 miles is a family member, right? Like you aren't thrown into even having to understand it,
Yeah.
right? But there's a lot of people would look at that as ignorance. And I think that it's almost like an innocence. It's like a sad innocence
Yeah.
where it's like you've never been in a position to learn. You've never been in a position to be forced to learn or even know that it's an option to learn.
Yeah.
right? And so I wonder if some of it, again, not justifying people's shit behavior, but if some of it is actually just like, hey, you know what? I've never been in your shoes. I've never been there and I don't understand it. But people are so offended by everything these days that people are scared to be like, hey, can you explain this to me?
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that a lot. Like, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt just because, like, I'm a people pleaser. But, like, with the whole Ariel mermaid thing, like, there was a lot of people that were like, oh, like, but what if they did that with, the princess and the frog? I'm like, okay, well, she's literally the only black princess. So wouldn't make
Yeah.
sense to make somebody else, but like I kind of understood like both sides. Like I would be, confused. I don't know if I would be offended, but I would be confused if they did that with Tiana, making her a white girl. So
Yeah.
like, I get people being, upset. They wanted the like original Ariel, like the way she looked and everything. So like I get it, people just wanting it to stay the same. But at the same time,
No, but there's the other side of it. And you
I'm
and
like,
I are,
well, she's a
but
fish. Like, she's not even
well,
a real thing. She's not a like. I mean, I believe mermaids exist, but I'm like, we've never seen one. So in reality, it's a cartoon character. She could be purple. Like, nobody cares. It's a fish in an ocean talking to other fish. It's fine.
but even not only that, but like you and I just over like lunch one time as a date, like we were on like a coffee date when you were having a rough day or something, when you were like, I don't know, probably 13, 14, and we were talking about, and we can cut this if we need to, but we were talking about the fact that like even dating looked different, or having friends or having crushes on boys, like all these things just looked different because you never saw what that looked like anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Even like now, like in my adult life, I'm like, I still kind of get on the fence about like dating and stuff. 'Cause, I don't really see it unless it's on social media with some, like, famous couple. Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't surrounded by it, and, like, my dad, like, he always made it, like, me and my sisters make fun of it, but, like, he made it, like, a thing how, like, we had to marry a black guy, but, like, the way he would word it, it's um, like, if we were like, "Oh, we have a crush on so and so," it's like he would say, is he a brother? Like, because that's like black people, they just call each other like brother and sister,
Yeah.
auntie, whatever. So we would always like, my sisters and I would always like laugh and mock that phrase.
That's
But
awesome.
like
Yeah.
it was so funny. But like we would, but then like I feel like that kind of hindered my view on dating outside of my own culture. Like I'm just like is it like why? Like are those the only guys that are gonna go for me? And like I don't know if this is racist or not. I'm not into black guys. I just don't care for them. Um it's just not my preference. But it's like, do other people say the same thing about me? Like, do they not want to date me because I'm black? Like, and there was like a very brief moment in time where I like didn't see myself as pretty because, like all the guys were going for the white women or
Yeah.
anything other than black. And like I'm like, are we not good enough? Like, what is and it wasn't talked about in my house. We didn't talk about dating and things
Yeah.
like that. I didn't have all my friends were white, so you know, they didn't have an issue with getting anybody they wanted. So like I didn't really have anybody to turn to when it came to dating and stuff like that. Like I have my older sisters, but like my oldest sister's 4 some years older than me. So, when she was dating, I was like in grade 6 and
Yeah. You
I
weren't
didn't
there.
date at that age, So then
Yeah.
once it did come to dating, it was like, oh, like I like this guy and then like she would tell me to like go for it, but then it's like, okay, but like he's white. Like is he really gonna like me? Like
Yeah.
it's always a question even now. Like I'm just like, do they like even if they've seen me in my head for some odd reason, I'm like, do they know I'm black though? Like, I know we've made eye contact, but have you seen my skin? Like, do they look like yeah, like, I'm like, yeah, they see me, but I'm like, but did they really see me? Like,
But did they notice
did they have their color eyes on? Like, did they see like,
their
oh,
color
she's not
eyes?
white? I don't know why I asked
That's
myself that question.
amazing.
I have no idea why that question pops in my mind, like
Yeah.
knowing that they've actually physically seen me.
Yeah.
But it's like, what if they what if they forgot and
Yeah.
like changed their minds? Like even with my first relationship, he was white or half white,
Yeah.
Hispanic, whatever he was. And like it got to like a point where, cause like I always had braids in my hair. I like rarely ever had my hair like this, mostly because I
Yeah.
didn't know how to do it. But my mom was just always braiding our hair. And so it came time to like take my hair out.
Totally.
Like, I'm not braiding your hair again. I was like, oh my God, like, is he gonna break up with me because of my hair? Like, and I was genuinely very worried. It's such a dumb question.
Wow.
But I had a conversation with him. I was like, okay, like, like my hair isn't as long as it was in braids. Like it's shoulder length. Like, it's
Yeah.
not halfway down my back. Like, are you like, and he's like, yeah, it's okay, that's fine. And I'm like, but like, will you still like me? And he was like, I'm not dating you because of your hair. Like,
Yeah.
if that was the case, then what would be the point kind of thing. But like, it was a genuine worry for me. And like, I didn't know how to like process it.
Yeah. Well, and thank you so much for that vulnerability. I think that's where, like, I personally get excited. I mean, I some of my favorite people that I follow online are Black creators and interior decorators and stuff because it's just like they use so much color and it's bold and it's beautiful and I don't know. I love it and they're so stylish. Like I personally, they're some of my favorites,
Yeah.
right? And I've always had Black friends and especially as an adult and things like that. And so for myself, having heard some of this before and understanding that, I remember walking through life for about a week where everywhere I went, I was like, what if I was the minority?
Yeah.
What if I didn't feel like I fit here? What if I didn't see myself on a mannequin or didn't see myself in a magazine or didn't see myself on a TV show and couldn't identify,
Mhm.
right? Because as a white woman, it's so easy to see myself in all of those situations
Yeah.
because I'm everywhere,
Right.
right? And so for me, every time I see like a new TV show come out or I see, you know, Shavonda Gardner and Carmian Hamilton, and I'll link them in the show notes. They're two incredible designers that I have followed for years quietly in the background because I don't comment because I'm bad. But like every time they have a massive success, I'm so excited. And when I saw Little Mermaid come out, I was like, that's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
why can't we change it? Why can't we change how things are being done
Exactly.
and make the world feel safer for people, help more people to feel seen or understood or heard or whatever? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the whole point of this podcast, let's be honest, is like help people feel seen and heard and understood and have these conversations,
Yeah.
right?
And it's like, and like this just like randomly popped in my mind when you said safer. It like triggered a memory like
Yeah.
of a conversation that I had mostly about the States.
Yeah.
And I used to have a friend, she lived there for a bit, and she was saying how I should come and visit her. And I was like, no, like I want to see you, but like I don't want to go there. She was like, why? And I was like, because, often people who look like me get shot by the police or get the cops
Yeah.
called to them, get yelled at by some random Karen walking in the streets. I'm like, I don't want to have to risk that. And I don't want to go to the States ever. And,
Yeah.
she was like, oh, like, well, this doesn't happen in the area that I live in. I'm like, it literally happens all over that country. Like, I don't care where you're living. It happens every single day to someone, whether it's filmed and,
Yeah.
goes viral or not. It's always happening. And I'm not trying to risk it. Like, not trying to say that Canada's not, racist,
Oh,
but like,
no, no,
I'm
no.
like,
But
I'm
it's not, it doesn't feel
safer here.
dangerous. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel
Like,
dangerous here.
yeah. Like, if I'm walking on the sidewalk and I see a cop car, I don't get scared. Like, I'm just like, oh, they're just patrolling in the area. But I feel like if I was in the States, then and I saw a cop car, I would get nervous because I'm like, I've seen all the videos. I've seen people walking to their car and they get
Mhm.
tackled. I'm like, I don't want to risk my life trying to go get my mail or catch the bus. And like, I often run to the bus stop because I always leave late. I'm like, if I was in the States, and this like comes across my mind at least once a month, like when I'm running from for the bus, I'm like, if I was in the States right now, like somebody might think that I'm like
Running
doing
from
some sort of
something.
criminal activity. I'm like, thank goodness that I live in the area that I do where I don't have
Yeah.
to worry every day about taking the bus and having somebody, you know,
Yeah.
call someone on me because they think I'm suspicious. Like, eh, if it's a very nice, safe country. If you don't live here, you guys should come here because
Oh, I know it is. It
the
is.
state sucks.
That's what US listeners are like, and delete. No.
They're like, no, how
No,
dare you talk about a
it's
country?
just so it is so different. I was
Mhm.
in Florida quite a few years ago when there was a ton of unrest, we'll put it that way, going on around Black Lives Matter stuff. And this was quite a few years ago. And I remember walking with a friend there, and she's like, no, 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 we're fine because we're white. And I was like, what? And I felt in danger. And she's like, I can't even believe I'm going to say this, but like, we're okay.
Yeah,
And I was like, that's gross.
that's
Like,
so
that's actually gross. Like, that should not be a concern, is like how to teach your kids to deal with cops and how to do those things. Cause that's never something like I'll ever have to deal with.
exactly.
Right. So, on behalf of like ignorant idiots everywhere, I'm so sorry
Thanks.
that you have to deal with that because that's
Apologize for all
horrible.
my folks
I'm
and
apologizing on behalf of all the white people. Like,
all the bad white people. I've
all
met
the
some
bad
great
white
white
people.
people in my life. You are the greatest white person that I know,
Thank you. There's some good ones out there,
right? So we'll just apologize for the bad ones, the bad
right?
apples in the basket.
Oh, there's bad apples in every basket, like you said, with like other cultures against you, right? But is there anything that people can do or say or ways that they can react in a not just like a donate money to a fund, but like an actual, like tangible, hands-on thing that people could do to ease some of that barrier?
Um, I definitely feel like the biggest help, especially when it comes to, those in power, like cops and any government official,
Yeah,
I feel like the training is like where they need to start. Like, get a really good teacher, whoever trains those
yeah,
people, and like, because like there's racist cops everywhere, but I feel like you can donate as much as you want to what all the organizations in the world, but I'm like, essentially, like, yeah, you're helping, but like probably 2%. I'm like, you're just putting money. Who even, I don't even know who runs those things. Like, it
right?
could just be a liar who's like, oh yeah, like I'm donating to Black Lives Matter, but really they're just pocketing the money for themselves or putting it somewhere else. So I feel
Yeah.
like the best way to start would be to retrain all those people. I don't
Mhm.
know how long cop training is, but I'm pretty sure it's like not that long. I've heard, I could be wrong, but I've heard it's not very lengthy.
No, it isn't.
um, they could probably make it a bit longer and teach how to deal with different situations.
Yeah.
um
But what about even like on a tangible level for just like an everyday person? I know one of the things that I was thinking about and like stepping into this episode today was like, what about even just like making eye contact and saying hi?
yeah, like knowing that you're like
Like
a
just
friend.
befriend people that
Yeah,
just like knowing that we're all the same. We're all just humans.
exactly. Yeah, like saying hi, acknowledging. And I think also a really big thing would be teaching about Black history in school. I mean, I haven't been in school for a bit, but
Mhm.
I know at least when I was in school, it was literally never talked about.
Yeah.
Like the idea was floated, but like people would probably hear that from like, their their parents or cousins or whoever, wherever that person heard it from. That's where it was like all word of mouth stuff. I feel like teaching it in schools, like, or teaching about differences from like a young age, like,
I was gonna say, even just talking about cultural differences as a whole.
yeah, like just like letting it be known, like, just because they look different, like we're all the same. Cause like, I've encountered kids like in my adult life, like working with kids, they would make comments like, oh, like your skin looks like poop, or like, oh, why are you brown? And I'm like it's like innocent, like I just
Yeah.
laugh about it. It's like a funny story for me to tell to their parents because like they're so innocent. Like, but I'm
Can I
like,
lick you? Do you taste like chocolate?
oh my God. My, wait,
That
I have
one?
a funny story. My cousin, so for some odd reason, I don't know how biology works, but in my family on my dad's side, both his parents were Black. Somehow his sisters came out like tanned looking, like
They're very pale
you've
compared
seen
to the
them.
rest of you. Yeah.
Right. And so my
Yeah.
youngest cousin, I don't know if you remember him, but actually I won't even say his name on here. But my youngest cousin, when he was little, because he was, different, like colored than the rest of us,
Yeah.
he always
Just a
would
different
say that
shade.
we looked like chocolate. And he would always try to lick us. And
Oh
like he
no.
was so little, right? So it was so innocent. But he like, like, can I taste your chocolate skin? And like, no, like I'm not a chocolate bar. I'm a person. And like, it was so funny to me. Like when you said chocolate, like it just brought that memory up. I haven't thought about it in such a long time. But
You have to
like
bug him about it now. Now that you guys are all
I
older,
should, I
you should
should,
totally bug him about it now.
right? Remember when you thought we were chocolate? How do you think now?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, but kids, like, they're so innocent. So, like, when kids ask me, like, especially if they ask me, like, why is your skin darker? Like, I'm just like, oh, like, I was just born like this. And I always, even though they're toddlers, I like retort the question back to them, like, why are you like that? Like, why do you look like that? And they're like, because, like, it's only the sassy kids that
Yeah.
ask those questions.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, oh, like, why do you look like that? And they're like, because, like, it's just my skin. I'm like, yeah, same here. Like,
Yeah.
or one kid asked, like, he's like, why are you brown? And I was like, oh, like I was born like this. And he's like, for your whole life? I'm like, yeah, of
You're like
my entire
crazy.
life. Like, it mind boggling. Like, I'm sorry that it's
Yeah.
so crazy. Like, but I'm like, oh, it's cute. Like, you just, and you can't, like, I feel like a lot of parents, they kind of tiptoe around it when their kids ask those questions. Like, they're like, oh, like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, just be honest about it. Teach them to be respectful. It's literally so easy. Like, they're not asking because they're afraid. They literally just want to know. Like, kids are very
They're
ignorant
just
in an innocent
curious.
way. They just want to know. Like, just teach them. Like, it starts with the parental generation. Like, they're the
Yeah.
ones who have to teach their kids to accept everybody for who,
Oh, let's just say the word again, accept. It's so much about acceptance.
right? Like,
Acceptance and not just judging. Because
yeah,
it is. It comes from parents and how we
right.
talk about people and how we discuss people and how we look at things. And
Yeah, like, and it's always like, oh, like my dad was, he didn't like Black people growing up. So that's how I was taught. I'm like, yeah, maybe if you were taught differently, your
yeah,
views would be different. So I'm like, you gotta teach your kids to accept and be respectful towards
yeah,
everybody. And then the world will be slightly less violent. There will still
right?
be chaos everywhere, but at least that will be dealt with.
It would take care of a little tiny corner.
Like everybody's like, oh, like the world would be so much more peaceful, a better place. I'm like, not really. But if you got rid of one of those negative things,
You're
it would
hilarious.
be like 2% better, at
You're
least.
like, it would tweak for a few of us.
Right? Like some of us
Just a
can
little
just,
bit better.
but everything else will still be there.
I
Pollution
love it.
and global warming is still an issue. So if we can get rid of
I
the
love
racism,
it. You crack me up.
maybe.
You totally crack me up. I could not love and adore you more. I hope you know that. No, I hope that anybody listening to this today and hanging out with us today, that you heard something that like triggered something, shifted an idea for you. I mean, even if you just ask the question different of like, where are your ancestors from? Right? And did any of those like cultural parts from your ancestors come in? Like, were you raised with any of those? Like, just even some simple questions like that on how to talk differently, teach your kids differently, and start to shift your thinking on it. I think that we need to be more curious. We need to be less judgmental, but we also just need to give people a bit more grace when it comes to their crazy judgments of us. Because y'all, some people are just actually ignorant and stupid. And other people are actually just genuinely curious and don't know any better. Right? So I hope you learned something. Please give us some feedback on this in the show notes or send me an email about this. Join us again in 2 weeks for another amazing topic, and please tell your friends and other people. Show notes located at thetaylorway.ca, where you can also see a beautiful picture of Miss Kiara. I know there's a couple on there because she's a stunner. And all the contact information for her as well, and her new business that she's starting, doing prenatal care, which
you're gonna. I didn't even tag my business name, give you the name of it. I don't think I did.
You didn't, but I'm gonna ask you for it because I saw it in the notes you sent me. So subscribe now on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you listen to your podcast. If you love the show, please leave a rating and a review. And thank you so much, Kiara, for being here today.
Yes, thank you for talking with me about this. It was really fun, actually, and therapeutic.
Good. And you're so welcome. The vulnerability was incredible, and I love your heart. And listeners, we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.